Aloha and welcome to Faith in Politics, where we aim to discuss politics through the lens of faith, both here in Hawaii and around the world. I'm Brendan Scarborough, your host. With the primary election just days away, there's no better time to look at the economy. We will see that there's definitely a direct link between voting and the economy. In fact, Mac McKeithen discusses the one thing that's hitting us all: gas prices. But we start this episode with part one of a discussion about the economy, and this time we hear from the average citizens just like you with their thoughts. Then Mike Rompel of Domino's Pizza Hawaii and Malala Poe, general manager at Kalo TV, react to the comments made in the interviews.
So when you vote this year, how much of a factor is the cost of living to you?
It's a huge factor. I mean, this is where we live, and as long as I can sustain my family in my home, you know, I want to continue living here. If that continues going up past my income, obviously going to have to possibly look at changing our location.
Huge, because it directly affects your daily living.
It's pretty important because my husband and I, of course, are retired, so our income really doesn't move up very much.
Almost everything. It's been messed up for 2 years now, and we got to get it back on track.
The cost of living is a huge factor because our prices here in Hawaii have just gone up in the past year. The cost of groceries, gas, and rents going up astronomically, the cost of housing all across the board.
Things are kind of a mess right now, so I feel like we need to vote for some people that are going to bring some change.
We thought, oh, we're going to have like 1,000 extra every month. But now, because of the cost of living, it's like not even half of that is left.
The economy is important, but also the issues behind the economy and what is happening behind the scenes. The decisions being made that put our economy into this position that it's in need to be addressed. And those are completely leadership issues, and they came from the top down, and now they're affecting all of us.
Big factor, because I see some of my money taking a dive. I see inflation rising and people starving and being kicked out of their houses because they can't pay rent. And there's all kinds of problems.
That's a really hard question because I think of a million things that are all involved in the economy, but I'd say 100%.
Well, I have a big family, and being a sole provider and Hawaii being as expensive as it is already, you definitely have to consider what's it gonna cost to put food on the table and to fill up, the tank of my car. So
what are your thoughts on that?
Yes, I mean, we all hear about inflation, but we feel it long before we hear about it. We don't have to have someone tell us about what the rate of inflation is. We should be able to see that everything costs us twice as much. Politicians want to make it a difficult subject, and it's a simple subject. There's only three things that really influence the cost of living. Probably 90% are those three things: safety and security, land and land use, and energy. All you really have to do is solve three things or work on three things. It's when they try to tell you that we're working on these top 100 things that it's an illusion. You don't have to work on 100 things. You just have to work on three.
We all kind of knew something was occurring. I know they blame Russia a lot on this, but I mean, we kind of knew it beforehand because the gas prices kept going up, increasing up. And we noticed in our stores that food prices kept increasing, and then the lack of inventory. So we immediately knew something was occurring, but yet we're dealing with a lot of other issues, it seems like, and not really dealing with the issues that we're really struggling with.
So this has been a political debate probably for 100 years, right, since the New Deal. The reason why it's so apparent to us now is because there's such a dramatic difference. I'm 50 years old. This is the greatest eye-opening experience in my 50 years. You go from one set of policies that had gas at half the price, and you go to a different set of policies that double the price of gas. One is right, one is wrong. It's easy to see. Smoke and mirrors is the rest of it. There's been wars for all during that 50 years. There's been wars for all during the 100 years. The only difference is policy.
Seems like it's how we vote. We get back to how we vote versus just complaining about it, right? Because they say our vote matters, And here's a prime example of our vote mattering.
There's no doubt that these next upcoming elections, both this year and probably in 2 years, are the greatest elections of our lifetime. It might sound cliche to say that, but we only have today, and today is the most important day of our lives, and we need to take believing action to do something about today. And so obviously what's coming up next is the most important. So I don't want it to sound cliche, but at this time, it is important. We have to vote.
It feels frustrating to me that you have a big family, like one of the gentlemen said there, and there's really nothing you can do about it, with putting food on your table to feed your family. And now you can't feed your kids as much or as healthy as you would like to because of those costs.
Yeah, I think that's the first sign of defeat, when you feel like there's nothing you can do. We aren't there yet, but we're getting there.
Right.
And we need to vote to make sure that we maintain our freedoms and our ability to vote, and that vote matters. Of course, in Hawaii, if you have 1/3 of the population voting, your vote is exponentially greater than those that don't vote. At the same token, you can look at that and say, well, then if we do vote, my vote is exponentially greater than those that aren't voting. And I just want to vote with other like-minded people and have that vote matter in a way that makes a difference on who's changing policy.
How do you think your vote will affect the economy?
It depends on how many people vote the same way. I'm hopeful that it will altogether that'll make a big difference.
You know what? I've never given it much thought. I understand that the economy goes up and down, recessions.
I think our votes have a huge effect on the economy because these are the political representation of us that then go in and pass bills, make the legislation, and set the rules for our nation that then we all have to abide by. We're the voice, they're just the tool that puts it on paper.
Hopefully it does. I mean, you vote people into office who can make change.
We try to pick people that are cognizant of the fact, that it's going up all the time.
I hope that my vote and everybody that goes out and vote, that our votes will affect the economy, because we're going to vote for officials that will listen to all of us and listen to our concerns and take those into consideration.
They got in through votes and you move them out through votes. That's how our democracy, our republic works. And so every vote is important because there's people that are going to vote against America, so to speak. They're going to vote for continuing down this path that we're going down. And so we need our votes to counter those votes and to push it back the other way and to take our country back.
That is hard to say. I know every vote counts, and I just got to be one of the many.
Well, I think the leaders that we choose when we vote are who directly influence the cost of living and how we are able to live our lives.
I hope it will, but I think from the way things have been handled that it's really going to get worse. That's my opinion, that we should all be ready for that. But God's in charge.
So I think that it's our responsibility to get out there and to let our voices be heard, and that's the way to affect change. And if you don't vote, then you're not doing your responsibility. You're not holding up your end of what it means to be in this country.
Ultimately, I think voting is something that if we all vote our conscience and vote biblically, that we can make a bigger impact together. One vote is still just one vote, but one vote is one step closer to making change.
What I took away from those videos is really how I feel. Like, does my vote really matter? They got in somehow, right, of voting, and so we can get them out somehow. And I think it's important that we have at least the idea that not only does my vote count, but maybe it doesn't count the way I wanted to count it today, but maybe the next time we go around, there's more of us as believers that can say, yes, my vote counts alongside someone else. Therefore, we can put people in office. Because right now, who's being heard? It's the party or platform or the direction that's going down a path that I don't feel that it's healthy for my family.
Yeah, so this is the important part right here between a democracy and a republic. In a democracy, we all vote, and then that person that gets elected decides policy. In a republic, we vote, and that person is for the people, by the people. And that's the massive difference. Our vote matters because we're a republic. That when that person gets elected to office, they represent us. They don't tell us what to do, we tell them what to do. When we give up that power, then there's another force that takes over. And we just cannot allow that force to take over. And how we do that is we do not relinquish power. How do we not relinquish power? We vote.
It's a little frustrating too when you look at the statistics on the number of believers that don't vote. They may be registered to vote, but they don't vote because I think they have the same frustrations that we all do. We're looking at this big elephant, right? And we're trying to move an elephant away, or this big, massive problem. We think, well, it really doesn't matter.
Ironically, use the term elephant. So I think often as believers, we sit back and say, well, God's in charge. God is in charge of our lives as we take believing action. If we don't take that believing action, we relinquish that power. We relinquish a power that is unlimited. And we can't do that just for the simple fact that sometimes when we vote, it doesn't turn out the way we expect or want it to, and then we have these consequences. We don't live by those consequences. We do, we put God at the center of our lives and we live by faith, but we still have to take believing action and vote those in that have common interests.
So we need to get registered to vote. We need to then go vote, and then we need to get involved.
The power of the people in America is still massive. Whether we see that in times of tragedy or we see that in times of triumph, we still have to realize the masses in America matter, and that's what controls what happens in our lives and in our world, and we need to take action. I always look at the numbers, and simple county seats are won and lost by a couple hundred people. As you go to positions of greater power, those percentages are still very similar. We can make a difference, but we can't make a difference until we take action. But we still are responsible for the outcome and what we leave for our generations.
Okay, so the current president said last month, Americans are more financially comfortable than at any other time in the past decade. What are your thoughts about that?
I would definitely say not. I'm a small business owner, and cost of living, gas prices, everything's jumped up. So it's a little bit more tight, I think, for the average American.
I'm going to say that's a bold-faced lie.
I don't know how to answer that question. I don't know what universe he lives in.
I think that was just probably a political spin to make himself look good, and I wouldn't agree with that at all.
I would like the president and invite him to come visit the working class family, and let's sit down and let's look at our financial books. He might change his opinion.
I think that is exactly the opposite how almost every single person feels.
I personally know so many small businesses have gone out of business, people who aren't working, businesses that can't find workers to fill their positions. Everyone's struggling, and it's a mentality, and it's like a virus that's come into this country.
The cost of everything has gone up. Gas, groceries, plane tickets. I don't think the cost of anything has gone down, so we are not financially comfortable right now.
The country is not doing as well as it has done in the past. I feel like people are struggling more now, maybe living more paycheck to paycheck.
Probably half of our income that we normally have is been reallocated because of the cost of living rising, specifically here in Hawaii, but all over.
That's my answer.
Food is getting more expensive. There are shortages that are happening, and I feel like that it just is not a true statement.
I work in sales, and so that obviously directly influences our income, and people just aren't spending the same way because their money is also really tightened up.
That's a lie. We feel it at our house, and I know thousands of other families are feeling it too.
To say that it doesn't exist and say that people are getting better is like having cancer and just ignoring it and saying, oh yeah, everything's fine. The tumor's going to go away on its own. It's not. It needs to be removed, and voting is the tool that we use to remove this cancer from our country.
Can I say this on TV? Nope.
Do you think that the president is gaslighting the entire nation?
100%.
The entire world.
Yeah.
The entire world. And it's not just the president, but it's his handlers, because we all know and can see that the president is not there 100% mentally. So who's ever behind the president pulling the strings is trying to make us believe a narrative that is completely false.
I think that he says what those who are paying him to say wants him to say.
Absolutely. A kid can tell you that. The main thing is that we just open our eyes and don't look at things as politics. Look at what's happening.
You know, they're going to say what they need to say to get the vote. And so if he can flip everybody's idea of what's actually happening, of course he's going to try and do that.
I'm concerned about our president's mental health. I'm seriously, I don't know his true mental condition right now.
I imagine in his bubble, he thinks he's doing right and saying what he needs to say, but it's hard to say.
I don't know how anybody could believe what's coming out of not just his, but his entire administration's mouth, because if you are really in the communities and living life as an average American, I don't think that you could say that with a straight face.
I don't trust him. I don't believe anything he's saying, if that's what you're asking. So.
That's a big...
You know, for all of us, this is a simple one, but for all of us that are believers, this is one of the first lessons we learn. For those that live upright, the world is upside right. For those of us that have no standard in the truth of God's word, the world is upside down and we don't recognize it. We were all there before we were believers. But once you are a believer, sometimes it's hard to recognize that someone that isn't doesn't see the world the same way we see it. Just by the numbers, the cost of living is doubled. Anyone that disputes that, well, maybe they'll dispute the exact amount. It is more, dramatically more. Anyone that disputes that is disputing it with their own numbers, not reality. And so whether or not the president believes what he says, I could never tell you. I think Elon Musk said it best, that whoever's writing the teleprompter is the one that's running the country. But taking away a personal attack at the president, I would just say that anyone that believes what's being said isn't either looking at reality or is unable to see that they're living in a world that's upside down. And we have a cure for that. We have it's the word, right? It's the truth in God's word.
Hawaii is already expensive. And then you add on top of that all that's gone on with COVID and then, wars and all that. But even all those, I feel like there's a fundamental issue with policies that are being created that don't help the people here in Hawaii. How do you keep the standard of living down, even in the midst of all that's going on? Inventory here in Hawaii is at its record low. We have to have ships that bring things over here. And now the ships are all tied up and taken forever to get here, plus fuel prices that go along with that. Specifically Hawaii, to think that we here in Hawaii have better than what we did before he was in office is not accurate.
I mean, I'm sure there's a percentage of the population that is receiving more today than they received 18 months ago. However, that percentage is probably less than 5%. So 95% of the people are paying more for everything and have less at the end of their paycheck. I don't see where you could dispute that, especially in Hawaii. We all know that, but we have to take action in order to change it. And right now, the action that we can take is voting. We know that there are a set of policies out there that keep the cost of living down. And we know that we're living under a set of policies today that are not doing that. We have to do something about it, and we have to get out and vote.
Voting helps us to see at least some sort of relief in the cost of living here in Hawaii. We have to vote in order to sustain really godly principles and go after what God is calling us. Yes, the economy is hugely affects my everyday living. But even living in a very rough time with the economy, if babies are dying, that's a problem. If life issues are in front of us because we're not taking the steps we need to take for human trafficking and things like that, it's important that we vote not only for the economy, but also for all those other issues too that are godly principles.
I think what our responsibility is to share that there's a better way. And that better way is what we found and what we believe in, and that it has given us the prosperity, albeit during this last couple of years, not financial prosperity, but prosperity, right? As ye continue in my word, then are ye my disciples indeed. And ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. So we're supposed to be in a free society, but the only way that we get freedom is through seeking the word. There's definitely an argument to be made, but it won't convert anybody. But the love in our hearts is what will. We need to be able to fellowship with like-minded believers, and sometimes how we do that is by voting for other like-minded believers so that we have a greater platform to share on.
Special thanks to Mike and Malala, as well as those who shared their opinions. You're watching Faith in Politics. We'll be right back.
People ask me, how did I end up working at Colo TV? Well, as I was about to graduate from high school, I got involved with a video project at my church. The finished video was shown to Colo TV, and I was offered an internship for the summer. Of course I said yes. Next thing you know, I was offered a position. Being a small team, I got involved in all aspects of production, from camera work to editing to broadcasting. And what I love most of all is Colo TV's focus on spreading the gospel. In fact, we are the only local Christian TV station in Hawaii. We are always moving forward, making efforts to improve ourselves, and always focused on Christ. Our vision is bigger than any one person. That is why I want to ask you to consider being a part of the team by supporting us, and together we can be an influence on our culture with the message of Christ. Imagine that, working together, broadcasting aloha across Hawaii. Thank you for your financial support that empowers Colo TV.
Hey, did you know that Colo TV has an app? Well, we do. Have you downloaded it yet? It's filled with awesome content, including exclusive uncut material, and it's easy to download. Even your mom can do it. Simply go to the App Store, search Colo TV, hit the download button, and voila! You now have access to inspirational materials that you can watch anywhere. Download the Colo TV app today.
Welcome back to Faith in Politics. We continue our spotlight on the economy. Mac McKeithen discusses the one price tag we all have, gas prices. Here's Mac.
Gas prices are ridiculous, and it could even get worse. The million-dollar question is, why? Is this Russian-Ukraine conflict truly responsible for soaring gas prices? And the short answer is yes, but that's not all. However, let's start with this, so to speak. Because prior to the Russian-Ukraine war, Russia supplied the global market with 11% of crude oil. Now that may sound like a small amount until we realize we're talking about 10.3 million barrels of oil per day. And nearly 45% of Russia's economy is dependent on their oil. So they take notice. And now, with the US and UK having oil embargoes against Russia, combined with the increase in travel as restrictions are lifted, the demand for oil continues to outpace the supply. But Russia still supplies the EU with 25% of their oil and 45% of their gas. And it gets worse. Russia also controls a major pipeline called Nord Stream 1 that delivers gas directly to the EU. And to show you how dependent the EU is on Russian oil, Russia slowed the flow of gas to Germany to 40% capacity, blaming it on a turbine that Canada repaired but did not return to Russia due to the conflict. But because of Russia tying the reduction in flow rate to Germany because of that turbine, Canada was basically forced to send them the repaired unit back to Russia. See what I mean? And it gets worse. Russia also threatened to completely shut down the Nord Stream 1 gas supply line to the EU altogether if the West continues to reject Russia's oil. So what would that look like? Some suggest that it could cause oil prices to increase to nearly $300 per barrel. Now, these statements alone recently caused the surge that we saw in the oil prices, but it didn't last for long because soon after that, OPEC came to the rescue, so to speak. And please know that OPEC could easily increase production to meet the demand that we see today and beyond. And some members of OPEC, which consist of 13 countries, recently announced that they would increase the production of oil if asked by OPEC Plus. And that statement sent the surging oil prices that were at $130 per barrel back down to $100. But guess who is a part of OPEC Plus? Russia. And they have a card to play in all of this. And as a country, seeing this dependency on oil, we should always try to be more independent from it because of the negative impacts of it. And this is nothing new. But we somehow never seem to get to the point that we can get past this issue. And let's take note that the answer is not a one-stop shop. It's very complicated, and it must be dealt with in a collective fashion, so to speak. But rigorous policies as it pertains to the environment do play a major part as to why we always fall victim to these external factors. Now, the Keystone XL pipeline would not have solved this by itself. It would have only produced 830,000 barrels of oil per day. But combined with regulations that would allow for fracking and tapping into resources available such as Alaska and various safely offshore locations, that dependency could easily be countered without putting America at any environmental risk. As a country, we use over 20 million barrels of oil per day, and we only have the capacity of holding 700 million barrels of oil in our reserves. And although we may never fully be independent, again, we should always seek to be more independent. We have the ability, but the question is, will we ever have the unity to make it so? Higher oil equals higher prices across the board. And some of those prices that increase never return to baseline. We should not be paying this much for gas, but we are. And it's sad to say that politics are at the core of it. So what policies are you voting for? Addressing social and cultural issues, I'm Mac for Faith in Politics.
Thanks to Mac for that intriguing insight. As we navigate through these interesting times, we must always remember that voting is our responsibility and opportunity to exercise our rights as U.S. citizens. We encourage you to register to vote and then vote, and let your faith determine your vote. Again, thank you for watching Faith in Politics. We'll continue to bring a voice to the faith community here in Hawaii through interviews and commentary. This program exists because of viewers like you. And from all of us here at Faith in Politics, thank you for your support prayerfully and financially. If you believe the content we are providing is important, please consider partnering with us and be sure to share it with your friends and family. For those watching on social platforms such as Rumble or YouTube, please subscribe, like, and hit that notification bell. Don't forget to join us next week for part 2 on our discussion on the economy. I'm Brendan Scarborough. Aloha.